Hello and welcome to CYBR in 10. My name is Nick Dulovitz. I'm the Director of Technical Alliances at CyberArk. CYBR in 10 is a video series consisting of 10 to 15-minute installments. Each video covers a single topic with the common theme being education around CyberArk specifically and privilege best practices generally. This session will focus on the role analytics play in locking down privilege access within your client's environment. First, why do we need analytics? This quote from the Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report, I think, does a pretty nice job of summing it up. I won't read it out loud, but the idea is a bad actor that is leveraging privilege granted to them by the organization is hard to spot. The key being able to differentiate between normal activities and a potential abuse. To do this, privileged accounts must be monitored. Attackers always target privileged accounts after a perimeter breach, whether it's a local admin account, a domain admin account, a service account, something on a Unix Linux device, a network device, a database, more likely, right? Attackers are always going to try to escalate their privilege, or almost always try to escalate their privilege because that's what they need to do in order to get to those back-end systems where we store all the juicy data. So, one major theme that we at CyberArk continue to focus on is to push organizations to think like an attacker. As security tools and solutions are continually developed to protect organizations from existing vulnerabilities and threats, attackers are moving on to the next zero day. This makes taking a holistic approach to securing privileged access that much more compelling for an organization. Having a view into all privileged account activities with the intelligence to make automated decisions based on that data becomes critical. So if we look at the slide here, in the white text are standard methodologies that an attacker is going to try to use to get into your environment or to escalate their privilege once they've gotten inside of your environment. So the first thing they're going to do is they're going to do things like look for exposed privilege credentials. And what's an exposed privilege credential? Well, one example of an exposed privilege credential is when unconstrained delegation is enabled. And unconstrained delegation is a feature within Windows that you can turn on a per system level. And when it's enabled, any user that then connects remotely to that system, that user, the account that they're leveraging, that account's TGT or ticket granting ticket will be stored in memory on the target system. And what you can do with a TGT that's stored in memory is you can use it to go anywhere that that account can go. So it works really well for scenarios where that target system may need to impersonate the account to connect to some third-party service, but it's a big negative when an attacker may be sitting on that target system and can steal that TGT out of memory and leverage something like a replay attack. Other things that an attacker is going to try to do will be bypass privileged account security controls. And what we want to look to do is detect any scenario where these controls may be bypassed. So an example of this would be, let's say that you've got a privileged account security solution in place and you've got credentials that are obviously being vaulted. In order for a user to be able to authenticate to a system with a vaulted credential, there should be a corresponding checkout action. Well, if we're monitoring those logon events and correlating that logon information with what we see within our privileged account security data sets, we can perform that correlation and then say, hey, if we see that there's an account that's been used to log into a system without that correlating checkout, then we have a high likelihood of credential theft. Not only will we alert you about it, but we can actually go ahead and change that password at the time that we detect the high likelihood of credential theft, which means that the attacker who's currently leveraging that credential can no longer continue to move laterally with it because we've changed the password on them. Other things that attackers will try to do would be leverage known attacks for bypassing authentication. So things like golden ticket, overpass the hash, and hijacking domain accounts via DC sync. And then the last thing that we want to just cover real quick is attackers will try to leverage unusual access patterns that may not show up. So it's critically important that we understand what normal access patterns look like so that we can make that determination when we see something that is out of place or unusual. All right, so how does CyberArk approach this? Well, we do it with our Privileged Threat Analytics solution. In CyberArk, Privileged Threat Analytics, or PTA as we like to call it, is an advanced system for privileged account security intelligence. The solution provides targeted, promptly actionable threat alerts by identifying anomalous privileged user and account activity. If we quickly walk through these, the first thing that CyberArk Privileged Threat Analytics, or PTA again, is going to do is collect. So first, the solution focuses on collecting and analyzing the right data. CyberArk Privileged Threat Analytics collects the data that contains a high risk for extensive damage. What we'll then do is detect. So we'll look at that leveraging our analytics engine, which conducts a combination of behavioral, statistical, and deterministic algorithms to identify anomalous activities that indicate compromise. The self-learning analytic engine adjusts over time as normal behavior shifts, so we can change what normal behavior looks like as normal behavioral patterns in your organization change, right? Which is something that we would obviously expect in the real world to see. Finally, or almost finally, we're going to alert. So when abnormal activity is detected, Privileged Threat Analytics generates an alert. Alerts are assigned a risk score and prioritization, which includes valuable information enabling incident response teams to quickly respond and disrupt an in-progress attack. And then finally, we will respond. So not only will we let you know that something bad is happening within your environment, but CyberArk's PTA, in conjunction with the rest of our functionality, like the ability to, as an example, change a password, will then allow us to take an action based on that potential credential theft that we've detected. All right, so CyberArk Privileged Threat Analytics collects data from a variety of sources, including the CyberArk solution, SIM solutions, querying Active Directory, and network traffic. And by focusing analytics only on privileged activity instead of analyzing everything on the IT network, CyberArk's PTA is able to deliver targeted, prioritized alerts on the most critical malicious activity. This is what separates CyberArk PTA apart from most other security analytics solutions out in the market today. This is an important piece, right? You see that we are looking to collect information from your SIM solutions. PTA is not looking to replace a SIM. It's looking to run alongside a SIM and specifically deal with the privilege piece of the analytics problem. And then, by the way, integrate with that SIM so that we're still leveraging a single pane of glass to perform all of our SOC operations within an environment. And that, of course, is going to be the SIM that particular customer is leveraging. CyberArk's PTA leverages built-in algorithms written by CyberArk experts in privileged account security to analyze only the most critical activity in the IT network. The solution is designed to enable detection on indications of an attack such as lateral movement, privilege escalation, credential theft, and suspicious command line activity. When anomalous privileged activity is detected, CyberArk Privileged Threat Analytics generates a targeted alert. These alerts are equally as important as the detection, as they are the primary method of communication to our security teams. And again, we can dump those alerts right into your standard SIM. And then finally, CyberArk Privileged Threat Analytics takes incident response one step beyond detection and alerting, and includes the ability to automatically respond on a detected event. Once security teams detect a security incident, the next step is to contain the threat by cutting off an attacker's access, which is exactly what PTA will do automatically, right? And that one example, or one of the examples that we talked about earlier, was but doing that by changing a password in an automated fashion based on activity that PTA is detecting within the environment. All right, so how it works. So we talked earlier about how CyberArk's privileged threat analytics can accept data feeds from various locations within the environment. Now, you do not have to have all of these enabled. In fact, you could just have one of them enabled and still get valuable information from PTA. But on the left-hand side are all of the different places that PTA can accept data from. So, of course, it can accept data from the CyberArk solution itself, primarily the vault. It can accept data from your various SIM solutions that you have within your environments. We can accept data right from Active Directory via an agent that we can install on your domain controllers, a very lightweight agent that we can run on your DCs. And then finally, we also have a network tap that's available that we can use to scan network level data and send the appropriate information over to PTA. And then if we move on here, all right, we can take a look at the different CyberArk components that integrate with PTA. So it's not just the vault, but in fact, CyberArk's Privileged Session Manager has an integration with PTA where we can look at the activities that happen within a session. And based on those activities, like as an example, if a user goes into a Unix and Linux system and types a passwd, which is the change password command in Unix and Linux, based on the fact that they did that within the session, we could either terminate that session immediately, or we could simply suspend the session. And suspending a session is where the shell or that interactive session, from the case of a Unix or Linux session, it's likely going to be a shell. In a Windows session, it'll likely be a GUI, right? What we'll do is we'll suspend any additional input into that session, but we will not terminate it. So once the session is suspended, of course, that's going to generate an alert within the PTA dashboard. And then a user can go and they can analyze that, and they can either unsuspend, and that user would likely be a security admin, can go and review that alert, and then they can either unsuspend or terminate the session based on or upon review. And then finally, CyberArk's Endpoint Privilege Manager is able to respond or to block specific items on endpoints and then report that information up to PTA. So things like if someone tried to do so things like credential harvesting, from an endpoint privilege manager perspective, if we detect that and block it, we're going to obviously send that up to PTA as well, so it has that information. It can correlate that with a potential breach. And so, in a nutshell, that's CyberArk's privileged threat analytics and our feelings on where and how analytics fits into securing your privileged environment. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to your CyberArk account reps to further the conversation.